Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this morning. To my left is Katie Garrity and Kathleen Garrity. I always call her Katie. Anyways, and to her left is Mr. Ed Sawatsky. And representing the city of Winnipeg from the assessment department is Matthew Borasek. Barocas. And our recording secretary is Belen Rojo. We'll be hearing applications for revision in the regards to the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application and will limit discussions to those matters. Statements that the applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in this matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of other properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board of revision is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it along with the SNA administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at the hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to application for exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing process this morning, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and it will be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this morning. The session will close after all applications has been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. I'll ask our secretary to swear in the assessor and the first applicant.
Please state your full name. You swear the evidence you present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Help you God?
Yes.
Please state your full name.
Trevor Glenn Smith.
And you swear the evidence you present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, we shall begin with number 500 Waterfront Drive. Mr. Assessor, whenever you're ready, you can take us through the subject property.
Roll number 13099068050, 500 Waterfront Drive. Roll year 2019 assessed value $11,602,000. It's two buildings on one property. The property is located on waterfront between George and Heaton, right across from the river. Phase one, the one building has 43 units, was built in August. It was completed August 2013. Phase two, the additional 21 units, was completed August 2015 for a total of 64 suites. There are 60 outdoor parking spots. If you turn to page 2, you'll see the request for income information. So they got an extension for 15, and they sent their stuff in. Page 3 is our income value summary. What we have on record is 18 one-bedroom and 46 2-bedroom. I noticed that the appellant has slightly different numbers in terms of bedroom count. He's got 14 and 50, so we'll have to get that cleared up. For 64 total units though, and an average monthly rent, $1,293, with a 39.9 expense ratio, with a 5 cap as per age and area. Calculates to an estimated market value of $11,602,000. Page 4 are our rental rate comparables. So what was looked at based on the properties in the downtown area, it's one of the nicer, newer properties. So having to expand, I guess, the net in order to find comps that are more similar in age and quality was necessary. Nonetheless, the 4 comparables here, they do bracket the subject property in terms of gross floor area per unit and average monthly rent per unit, and they have various amounts of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. So if you turn to page 6A, this is the mailer that was submitted to the city. For the property. You'll notice it says gross 645,000. This would be based off of, I would assume, not including the second phase of the building, as it wasn't complete until August 2015. So it would be 21 units short. As such, the current condition would reflect, as per the time period, a much higher potential gross income. The expenses themselves, when looked at against the calculated gross income based on 64 units, when you remove the interest from this line, it comes up to $182,228, which is based on the $993,000 potential gross income. Even less vacancy.
I'm sorry, I'm just not sure where we are.
Okay, sorry. We're just looking at this right here.
Okay.
And so what I'm doing is basically, long story short, I'm saying that the expenses that they reported are much lower than what an investor would reasonably assume at 18% operating ratio when you remove the interest from the calculation. So it would be unreasonable to use that number as a calculation, so model was used. If you go to page 6B, I'll show you how I determined it's the calculation based on the potential gross. 6B shows a rent roll that was submitted for 2000. It was a 2014 rent roll that was submitted to the city, to the inspector at the time it was built. So I was looking at, see that there's rent, there's parking, but there's also discounts. So in order to calculate the potential gross rent, you can turn to page 6C. Using the amounts that were given, I was able to look at the stated rent pre-discount and calculate what the average difference would be from the suites that were occupied between parking and discount, and show that there was a $13.94 average benefit. That's the table on the right side of 6C. So I applied that additional $13.95 rounded to the stated rent pre-discount to come up with my calculation of average adjusted rent. And then I just worked that over the number of units in 12 months, applied a model vacancy to it, and used the model expense ratio and cap to calculate the value. Calculated value was $11,581,246. The city assessment was $11,602,000. Extremely similar. As such, I didn't see fit to make a change in the assessment. The following pages 7 to 24, they just show pictures of the property. It's new. And you can flip through those to take a look. Page 15, you can see the river across from one of the balconies. So based on my calculations of potential gross rent and expense information that wasn't usable, calculated to almost exactly what we have to assess that, so I didn't make a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vorkas. Mr. Smith, questions of the assessor?
Yes, just a couple. With, so you, on your page number 4 with the rent comparables, I think we're similar in that none of our, there were no close by rent comparables that were appropriate. Is that fair to say?
Not immediately adjacent to the property.
So these are not on waterfront or in that?
No, I didn't put
east
much
exchange
weight
area?
on the comparable.
Just quickly looking at them here, so 92 Princess, that has an effective year of 1972 here. That's a heritage building built in 1903 originally, correct? And then
Yeah.
whatever was renovated.
It's been completely renovated. My friend actually lives there.
Okay.
It's
So
all done.
it's high ceiling, brick and beam, large.
Yeah,
large
it's
units.
completely different style.
Okay. The second, number 2 on La Vérendrye there, that's one of those 4 or 6 plexes where there's no common area. It's kind of like a almost bungalow style stacked units, is that correct? No interior hallways, so the units are actually quite large.
The gross floor area per unit is much larger than the subject. I don't know the physical details as well on that property.
Okay. And then, just finally, the 160, pardon me, 160 Smith there, Timber Creek, that's renovated multi-story apartment tower at the corner of York, is it not? Owned by Timber Creek?
Completely different style of apartment.
Okay. Would you agree that that would be superior to the subject?
It's a different style. Maybe
Okay.
some people like that, maybe some people want to be along the road.
Okay, just for thoroughness purposes, how would you like to, I guess, address rebuttal?
You have rebuttal, you might as well hand it out, or give it to our secretary, she'll hand it out, and give the assessor a minute or two to look through it.
Yeah, and again, this is just for thoroughness. As the assessor said, it is a different style, but just so the board is aware of the differences. The first page on the rebuttal there just addresses the building in general, location, what the amenities of the building are. It has a large gym and games room, party room, etc. And if you flip to the second page, you can see the interior of the suites, full renovation, downtown views, nice exterior to the building, so considerably different. Subject is new, but the location of this and the amenities would make it superior to the subject. Just flipping further on, 6B, the rent roll that you have here. This was submitted for, pardon me, or collected for 2014.
That's the first year.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so these would be the projected rents upon the completion of the first building, I believe. Is that
Well,
correct?
the building, the phase one was complete August 2013. So this would be the 2014 rent roll. And on the side, you see the actual rents. So they were collecting rents and occupying at this time.
Okay, so we're looking at,
So do I get to address what he just handed
Yep.
out? So you handed out 160 Smith, and that's right downtown, in the middle of all the traffic, and the buses and the pedestrians. Would you not agree that some people don't want to be around that level of traffic and would prefer Park Lake setting across from the river?
I would agree that they are different locations, and I'll get into the subject location in my presentation.
But not everyone would want to live in an office-style tower, correct?
Well, it's not exactly an office-style tower, it was always a multi-residential building.
But like a tower like right downtown amongst businesses and,
No, certainly not everybody would.
okay.
Looking again at page 6B, so this is obviously during the lease-up phase. Do you know what month you received that?
Receive this rent roll?
Yeah, because we're looking at vacancy of probably more than roughly 50%, if I look at that rent roll. Yes, what I'm getting at here is, we're looking at the property in the very initial phase, where they have projected these rents. Whether they've achieved them is another matter.
It says actual rent on the side, and there's
So-
a distinction between the ones that actually were leased up and the ones that aren't.
So there was rental rates submitted for the property in the 2016 income and expense questionnaire, was it correct?
That not be post-reference information?
No, in the spring of 2016, you submit the 2015 year-end information, which had.
The 2015 rents or the 2016 rents?
2015.
Okay, 2015. That
So
would
those
be,
would be more recent than the 2014, correct?
yeah, 2015 comes after.
So just wondering why those weren't utilized.
That was what we received on page 6A in regards to that mailer. It showed the low expense ratio and the gross income of $645,000. And in the PDF that I clicked on, it wasn't broken down into suites. I would have used them if I was able to have that information, but when I clicked on the link, I just had 6A and 6B, and then I found also 6B, the 2014 manual, as evidence of what they were asking for, also including parking and discounts. So that's how I calculated the PGI over the phase one and phase two inclusive suite count.
Okay, so I'm looking at the April 29, 2016 income and expense questionnaire submitted to the city. And it does, as submitted by Garamark, the property manager, and it does have rental rates included in the submission.
Which page is that?
It's in my
Oh, it's-
material, so I've collected this off of the City of Winnipeg assessment site specific to this building. You can go in as the owner or agent and download the information
Mr.
submitted.
Smith, you're getting into your material,
Okay.
so right now we're just questioning the assessor.
So my question is, I guess, why the more recent income information was not utilized?
Okay, so I'm looking ahead to your brief.
Well, you
Now-
know, I have to stop, you know, because, Mr. Smith, you should be asking questions in regards to what you just heard from the city.
Okay,
And without, you know,
So-
we haven't had your presentation, so it's,
fair enough.
you know,
So,
No, like, your numbers are, okay, so I get what you're saying. You have a copy of this. I don't know why it wasn't attached to our PDF. Looking at these numbers, it doesn't show any indication of discounts. So I'd be hesitant to say this is more accurate than the 2014 rent roll, which shows more detail.
okay, those are all of my questions, thank you.
thank you. Is there any questions of the assessor?
The only one that I saw was with what I'm reading, there were roughly 21 vacancies then, or they hadn't?
Well, phase two was complete August 2015. So the potential gross income on page 6A would be affected by a lesser number of suites than what's currently up and running.
Okay. And the other question was, I think on one of these you talked about market value per suite?
Oh, that's just the average monthly rent per unit as calculated
Oh,
by
okay,
our model.
okay, so they're not resellable by the individuals?
No, this is an apartment.
That's what I thought, okay, just clear, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sawatsky?
Yes, did you actually view the site and take the pictures?
No, this wasn't me.
So you've never been on the site?
I have been, years ago. I have a friend who also lives at this place.
Good friends. On your rent comparables, Mr. Smith talked about 1, 2, and 3, but no one talked about 4. Of all the comparables you have, which one of those 4 is the most closest to the items we're looking at today?
In terms of physical composition, well, I mean, Trevor did bring up a fair point that this kind of apartment, there isn't a lot of it. So I didn't put a great deal of weight on these comparables. I did mostly in regards to my calculation for subject potential gross income. Which one would be most similar?
Well, in terms of age, I mean, number 4, 2000
Well,
to 212.
Yeah, it depends on which metric you're looking at.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that any of them would be as similar as I would like them to be, to use as a rent comparable. So,
Okay, I understand, thank you. That's all the questions.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. Was there a discrepancy in regards to the suite count or something?
yeah, when I was reviewing it, I noticed that we have
You have 64.
64, not the suite count, the composition.
Okay,
We have 18 in 46.
okay.
Trevor has 14 in 50. So that'll be something that has to be
Okay.
looked at after.
And the V-Day that we have here is April the 1st, 2016,
Yep.
correct?
Mhm.
Okay. The 5% cap rate, that is based on the age of the property?
Yep.
Okay, so, for the reference year, you have nothing, is that the lowest that you go, 5%?
That is correct.
Okay, and that's based, like I say, on age and that?
Age and area.
Okay. So the parameters that were used for the subject property are model-driven?
That's correct.
Okay, so, you know, you can't say that on a unit like this, the expense ratio is 40%? That's what you're using? So this is your parameters that you're using?
This is the parameters that we're using as per age and area for the model. We've got 39.9%.
Would you consider, you know, you have market value on page 2 of $281,25 per unit? Is that a ballpark figure, or that's just the calculation that you've done for an income approach?
That would be dividing the number of suites into the
But
assessed value.
You don't have a income approach and, you know, you're hanging your hat on income
Well,
approach?
that's what I've done by looking at the potential rents and examining their validity in regards to calculating what they potentially get based on what they reported as the expenses, because of the time, like I said before, 18% is too low, so we went to normal, and they don't get anything older because they just got built.
I thank you, sir. Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So 500 Waterfront Drive, relatively recent construction, obviously, built in 2 phases, with the first being constructed in 2013, that being the larger building, and the smaller one being completed, constructed in 2015. Total of 64 units, and the unit count that we have of 14 one-beds and 52 beds is as stated in the income and expense questionnaire submitted. So we have a relatively recent construction. Obviously that gives an image in people's minds. The building is well constructed. It's not elaborate, certainly. If you look at the interiors, it's pretty straightforward as far as the units go. We're not looking at luxury accommodation. It's nice, it's new. I certainly don't deny that. But there's no granite countertops or anything of that nature in these units, and the layouts are relatively straightforward. So you can see the interior from my photos there. One of the main issues that impacts this building is its location. If you look at my pages 10 and 11, you can see the site as well as the property location. The site itself fronts on Waterfront Drive, on the corner of George Avenue and Argyle Street. Page number 11 gives you an aerial view, and you can see the location better from this with the red indicator showing you where 500 Waterfront is. Now, if you go down Waterfront Drive, you can see closer in the Lombard, Bannatyne market area, you can see newer condominiums and some apartment construction that happened much further south than the subject, across from the water as well. Those are in the, I guess I would describe it as the sought after, the popular area of the East Exchange. You're in that area where office towers, or rather heritage office towers, are occupied. You've got lots of activity going on down there. As you move north, Waterfront changes significantly. The most northerly rental apartment property on Waterfront before the subject property, they are located in between McDermott and Pacific, 3 to 4 blocks south of the subject property. The subject itself is bordered by industrial properties to the north. It's bordered by Argyle School to the west, Alexander Docks, and additional industrial properties to the south, and industrial property in the Red River to the east of the subject. Is it adjacent to the Red River? Yes, it is. It's also adjacent to the Alexander Docks. If you'll flip to the very back of my brief, you can see some articles that I've included with regard to the Alexander Docks themselves. And I won't go through them, but essentially, the docks have been shut down and decommissioned and are fenced off. It is an eyesore, it has been for some time. It's also got a history of criminal activity occurring at that location. If you go through this in detail, you'll see this. Unfortunately, it is also where a murder did not occur, but where the actual body of the unfortunate individual was found at the docks. Now, did this occur on the property itself? No, it didn't. But this is the area in which we're looking. We're not in the southern East Exchange, and there is drug trade, etc., that still goes on in the docks area there, etc. We're talking. I'm not sure if you know the former Eaton warehouse building, and where the floor hockey arena is. We're talking north of there. So as you go north, you can probably picture where it is. So that's the environment that we're looking at. Certainly has an impact on the ability to draw tenancies, has an impact on vandalism, etc., that occurs on the property itself. Vacancy, what people are willing to pay to live there, etc. So moving on to the valuation, my page number 13, looking at the actual rents. So the rents, as stated, are coming from the year-end 2015 income and expense mailer. These were the rents that were in place and projected. Those were the maximum legal rents that they were able to charge. They did not always achieve these rents. So I'm looking at the maximum that they would be able to generate on the property by utilizing these particular rents. There were discounts. I did not have sufficient detail to apply those and bring down the rents to what were actually being charged. So we've gone with what was submitted. The bottom of page 13 and onto 14, we supply comparable rental properties in that they're newly constructed or recently constructed quality office or quality apartment buildings. You can see the rental rate ranges that are shown there. By and large, as I will admit as well, these are not located adjacent to the subject property. Many of them are suburban. And frankly, most of them I would consider to be superior to the subject property. We're talking about areas in Sage Creek, Waverly, South Pembina, etc. here. The rental rates that are being quoted for the subject property certainly fall in line with the marketplace that we show that is comparable. So, using the in-place rental rates, we come to a gross potential rent of $941,256. To that, we add the parking revenue that was achieved in 2015 of over $22,000, and the subject property does not have laundry income. So that's how we arrive at our potential annual income. Vacancy. Subject property was still under construction in 2015, so it did not have a stabilized vacancy at that time, unfortunately. So the property going forward does experience higher vacancy than is typical in some cases, but we have deferred to the city parameter of 2.8% for vacancy. Moving on to the expenses, I'll point out to start with, we don't strictly look at expense ratios and apply them. We look at the actuals from the subject property and look at whether they are reflective of the market and make adjustments where necessary. So subject property was still under construction in 2015, so as the city stated, the expenses are not full expenses and would not be appropriate to utilize. So what we have done in order to reflect actual expenses for the subject property, and I think this is reasonable certainly, is to use the property when it's fully operational. So we've supplied 2016 and 2017 operating expenses once it's fully up and operational to present the full picture of the property. So we've given a 4-year history of expenses for the property, and then we've stabilized them for 2016, as you can see in the second column from the right-hand side. The right-hand side gives you the adjustments that we've made in order to arrive at our final expense total of $367,678. Page 17 simply summarizes this, and we come down to an NOI of $568,945. Moving on to cap rate. We present our capitalization rate chart on page number 18. It's important to note that the properties here were purchased for the in-place income. They weren't purchased for repositioning in the market by renovation and an increase in the rental rates and increase in the return for a property. They are truly reflective of the properties as they were at the time. They were not bought for the upside. So we're looking at cap rates in the 5.44 up to 6.4% range. Now, unfortunately, there were not a lot of transactions of relatively new properties. The closest in age and probably the closest in as far as being the best comparable would be 333 Ward. We have probably all heard about this extensively. The property was built in 2006, traded in 2016 for a sale price of $18 million at a cap rate of 5.44%. We have had direct discussions with the parties involved in the sale, and the 5.44% is confirmed as the actual cap rate that the property traded at. The remaining properties, as stated, were purchased for in-place income. They range in size and age, obviously, most of them older. Further to capitalization rate, and we won't do this on every case today, so we'll just run through this relatively quickly. I did provide in this instance the Altus research study from across Canada. I won't have you go through that in any detail, but if you flip to the second page of the property, you can, or second page of that that particular material from Altus on the top of page 20. What this shows is the delta between primary markets, Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and secondary markets such as Quebec City, Halifax, etc. So you can see that there's a gap in between these secondary markets and a market such as Winnipeg. Winnipeg itself is not presented, but you can see that there is certainly a gap in what investors are willing to use as a cap rate in those markets. Transitioning this down to Winnipeg, cap rates on a national scale are going to be lower, or rather higher, in Winnipeg than they would be in your Torontos and your Calgarys, which is applicable on our page 21. Collier's cap rate study, we're not directly relying on this, but you can see that they're giving a range of 5 to 5.75% for investment grade properties in Winnipeg. And CBRE is giving a cap rate range of 5.5 to 6% in Winnipeg for investment grade properties. So we're looking at this as additional information as well as our cap rate study. So if you look at page number 21 and you look at the cap rates in your Calgarys and your Edmontons, etc., you can see that they are going to be, well, Calgary, I guess, is the only one on this page, Vancouver. You can see that they're going to be lower than they would be in Winnipeg. So 5% is not on the radar as far as cap rate in the Winnipeg marketplace. Moving on from that, subject property, relatively recently constructed, obviously, good workmanship, pretty straightforward. However, it's located in the area that it's located in, so I would suggest that it's probably not as ideal as a South St. Patel location such as 333 Ward. However, we are willing to concede a cap rate of 5.5% for the subject property to be in line with that. Further to this, I refer to our Board of Revision decisions for 2017 Realty Appeal on both 30 and 50 De La Seigneurie Boulevard in Southdale, I guess you'd call it, Island Lakes. These properties are also brand new construction and were appealed at the Board of Revision for 2017 with the board deciding on a capitalization rate of 5.5% for both of those properties. And I have the board orders on that, or they're reviewable by the board if you wish. So, looking at the subject property in relation to all of this material, quality, demand, location, obviously, we've applied a 5.5% cap to our NOI, and that gives us a $10,344,000 value based on those parameters. I didn't add. They have had somewhat due to the location. They have had vandalism beyond the norm. They've had a car racing between the two buildings in a getaway from the police. They have had a number of tenants that ended up being drug dealers that had to be evicted, etc. So the location has a significant impact on value in this case. The addendum materials are as I referred to. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
I thank you, sir. Matthew, any questions of the fellow?
Yeah, on page 14, you had calculated, well, you had a stated subject property parking income of $22,348, which was taken from the mailer that was submitted at a time when the building, the phase 2 of the building wasn't yet constructed, correct?
Partially, yes. It was fully operational in 2015, but it may not have captured a full year of revenue, potentially.
So as such, we could say that that parking revenue would be higher, given that there would be more people operating at like 2.8% vacancy, taking parking.
Yes. Now, yes, you could say that it would be marginally higher. Now, the 2.8% vacancy is probably generous on this property.
For your expenses, we're pretty similar in terms of the overall percentage expense ratio. You did it using 14, 15, and then a couple post-reference years. Does the board typically consider post-reference data information in regards to making a determination?
No, but looking at the subject property, and I think this is certainly a reasonable approach, and I think that the city will probably come around to this in time. When you have a newly constructed property that can't possibly have full operating expenses or income during a subject time frame, does it make most sense to look at those partial income and expenses, or to look at it when it's fully operational? So using the reasonable appraiser test, it would make the most sense to look at the property in a fully occupied, fully operational state, which is what I've done. If you want to make some marginal discount to the expenses based on them perhaps being slightly lower in one earlier year, that's understandable.
We came up to pretty much the same numbers on that. For cap, you got 5.5, we're at 5. 333 ward, we talked about before. Are there any calculations that we can look at today in regards to a stabilized mathematical calculation for 5.5, or just going on what the investors told you?
No, we reviewed the material from them, and we do not have their authorization to present the material at the board. However, it has been presented by other parties to the board and talked about extensively, both by participants in that deal or their representative, direct representative that works for the one party that was involved in the purchase and sale.
Are you aware that when Altus presented?
I'm very aware of what Altus presented, and their material is incorrect and has been shown to be several times.
Mathematically, or just by what's been said?
Mathematically, it is incorrect what has been presented. It's my information comes directly from the purchasing party of that property, and the capitalization rate that the purchase price resulted in, based on all of the actuals and assumptions for that subject property.
You mentioned there's some vandalism of this property, and maybe I missed some pictures of it. Did you include pictures of the vandalism?
No, the operator and owner of the property is actually an excellent operator. They're on top of all things like that, so they certainly take care of the vandalism as it occurs. The incident with the car racing between the two buildings, they subsequently put in some bollards, so that that's not a possibility in the future.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Security?
Just one about whether the difference in numbers of suites, you didn't address that. I wonder, it doesn't seem to have too big of a difference, but I thought you might want to answer to that, Matt.
I don't know if we need blueprints and like an actual physical review.
Okay, you wouldn't
Place.
know,
I
Trevor, why the
didn't-
difference?
I didn't walk through each suite, but that is as presented by the ownership.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Sawatsky?
Yeah, could you elaborate a bit more on the neighborhood and the problem areas in terms of the crime and so forth? I know you've given us quite a bit. Is there anything else you want to add to that? I don't have crime rate statistics or anything of that nature, unfortunately, but I guess perhaps one further indicator, there's a condominium project located one block to the north of this that is essentially stalled. Their sales of the units are going absolutely nowhere, and it looks like it may go into receivership, from what I understand. The
so that gives you an indication as to desirability of people to both live and invest in that area. If you continue down Waterfront, you're very close to the Higgins Avenue. Obviously, Higgins Avenue has some issues, as we know. So, as you get closer to that influence, obviously it trickles south, and you have more of an impact in the north end of Waterfront than you do in the south end of Waterfront, where, say, the Argentinian restaurant would be. There's some office locations there, and then nicer condominiums, and then there's a few apartment buildings to the north end of that section.
Do you see, what do you see in the future for that neighborhood? Is it gonna stay the same? Is there potential construction gonna take place that might help alleviate the situation that's there now?
I guess I'll direct you to my page number 11, just so that we're looking at the aerial there. So, pardon me, if you look between Alexander and Galt Avenue, that is the old Eaton's warehouse building, very large, 3 or 4 story brick warehouse. It has had, if it were located further south, I would argue that property would have been fully renovated and turned into either office or loft warehouse long ago. That hasn't occurred because the demand isn't there. Just north of that, you're looking at an indoor floor hockey arena and some very small little industrial parcels. There doesn't appear to be any demand to buy up those parcels and convert them to any higher use at this time. And I think the failed condo unit, or failing condo property to the north of the subject property would speak to that as well.
One last question, is that property on the other side of Waterfront, is that a city park?
On the other side of Waterfront?
It says
Yes, that is city-owned property, yes.
So it does front on a park, and then the river.
Yes, there is a park there and then the river.
Is it developed at all for any use?
Yeah, it has a pathway and some trees, and then as you go further south, you enter the fenced-off Alexander Docks area, which is right there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, I've heard quite a bit about Ward in regards to other hearings, etc. But just looking at Ward, this is one of the newer buildings. I mean, the closest to the subject property, in regards to age.
That's correct.
Okay. So you concluded probably the rate of the 5.5% for the cap rate, eh?
I did, yes.
Okay, so on page number 21 for the study there, the Canadian cap rates, I don't, the subject would be classified as a low rise, probably A?
It would.
Okay. So what did they determine as high rise in regards to, you know, I'm just looking at the category above it, the high rise B at 5. Do you know how they categorize them?
Well, I know that CBRE and Cushman and Colliers, when they're putting out these reports, they're looking essentially at what they call investment grade properties. So it's what would a national investor or a REIT purchase essentially, and what range would they buy within. So they're viewing Winnipeg for high rises between 5% and 5.75%. But again, that would be a high-rise concrete building, possibly with underground parking and other amenities, et cetera, et cetera.
So the city's at 5%, you're 5.5%, and gross wise, you're $30,000 apart, right?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, I thank you. Summation, if you so desire. It's up to you.
I think based on the calculations of potential gross income, given that the parking should be higher, we don't have any real expense information. We're highly similar. It's probably mostly a cap rate issue.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Just thinking along those lines, I guess, the income probably should be lower in that they do discount the rents, so their projected rent that they've quoted here is not necessarily what they actually get, so you'll get some increase in parking, sure, and you'll get a decrease in the actual rental revenue. I think we've been reasonable in our approaches on expense. You can't use a partial operating year to project expenses. And it does come down to cap rate on the NOI, and the market indicates that 5.5 is essentially the premium that anybody's going to pay in the market. Thank you.
All right, we'll press on to 722 Furby Street. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Assessor, take us through this.
I didn't get a brief for that one.
May I
Yep.
just interject? The ownership has asked that I simply ask for a 54-1 for that property.
All right. So we'll go on. Okay, you are seeking, Mr. Smith, the 54-1.
That is correct.
So that's just a confirmation that,
We did not submit a brief
Okay.
as noted, but it's as requested by the ownership.
so we'll go on to Furby, 485 Furby. Sorry. Okay. Mr. Assessor, can you state for the record the roll number and the value for the property?
For Furby?
Yes, please.
Okay, roll number 13-05069-3000. 485 Furby, 2019, April 1, 2016, reference date assessed value $1,993,000.
Yeah, that's the next one.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Go back to 722 Furby.
Oh, 722 Furby.
Yes, please.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
Just for our record.
Sure. 722 Furby, roll number 13-050404000. 2019, value $819,000.
Okay. Okay, we'll go on now to 485 Furby. So whenever you're ready.
485 Furby. Let me do a quick look here before I get started. 485 Furby, 13050693000. 19 Rollier, assessed value $1,993,000, built in 2012, effective year built, actual year built, yeah, 1912, effective year built 1932, 32 suites, 9 outdoor parking spots. Located just north of Ellis, between McMicken and Sherbrooke. If you go to page 2, you will see the request for income information. So we've got their 2015, but we haven't had anything prior to that for quite some time. We got an average monthly rent on page 3 of $705.63. 12 one-bedroom, 18 two-bedrooms, 2 bachelors, with a model vacancy and a 54.59 expense ratio. Net operating income of $119,599, 6 cap as per age and area, for an estimated market value rounded of $1,993,000. Go to page 4, you will see the rent comparables. So it's bracketed in terms of average monthly rent per unit, and the suite types. They all have they're all similar in regards to that. A lot of them have bachelors, 1 doesn't. 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. They're all in that same area. Young, Sherbrooke, Furby, and Arlington. Go to page 7. You'll see their what they've recorded as their net rents and their expenses. So when I was analyzing this income and expense statement, I did a little math, and I noted that some things didn't quite add up. So if you note on page 7, they've indicated the rent that they're indicating on line 105 is $174,586. When you go to page 11, they are saying that their potential suite income at 100% occupancy is $258,180. So 258,180. That's our potential. That's what they're saying. If you go to page 9 and you look at what they've indicated as their rental income loss in terms of vacancy and bad debt, in the top left corner, they're saying $33,989. So I take $33,989. I subtract that off the 258. I'm getting $224,191 in terms of what they're saying the rental income loss is. So going back to page 7, there's quite a difference between what they're saying their net income received is in regards to what their potential is and what they didn't receive. So it seems like I can't really make a determination in regards to what their actual income received was, because they're saying one thing on one page, but when you do the math, it doesn't even come close to adding up. Their reported expenses were $91,000. So if you take that $91,000, for instance, and subtract it from the calculated effective gross income, you come up with a net operating income of $133,129, which is a lot different than the $83,000 that they're stating. So it's hard to tell where this mailer is in terms of accuracy. The property was renovated in 2012. If you go to page 12, you'll see that they spent declared permit value $600,000 upgrading to an existing 30-unit, 3-story apartment building. Insulation, window replacement, drywall, cabinets, bathroom fixtures, accessories, refinish, shingles, sheetings and paint. So they did mechanical, plumbing, and electrical included. So they did quite a lot of work to this place. Page 13 shows that they added a couple suites to the property, bring our total up to 32 units. Page 14 to 16 show some pictures of the property in regards to unoccupied suite. So given that the consistency of the data in the income and expense statement is not accurate, we deferred to model in regards to income and expenses. Cap rate is 6. The rental rates, rental columns, they're all in this area. This area is not without its challenges in regards to tenancy, potential vandalism. I mean, Trevor and I, we talked about these properties ahead of time. Unfortunately, just due to timing and both of our workloads, we weren't able to book an inspection to go see the place as a whole. However, the 6% cap is based on age and area, so it's taken based on information from other properties in that area as well. So given the level of investment and non-usability of the income and expense statement, the inconsistentness model was deferred to, and no change was made. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Smith, questions of the assessor?
Yes, just in relation to all the remaining properties that we're doing here today, as you had mentioned, you did not get a chance to inspect them, correct?
That is correct.
So you haven't seen the interior condition, et cetera?
No, I know we were trying to book, but we couldn't.
Yeah, fair enough. You had referred to age and area for capitalization rate.
Yep.
So subject property here, located in the Spence West End area, as you mentioned, doesn't come much tougher than that, I don't imagine. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's not without its challenges, for sure.
And the property was built in 1912. You have an effective age of 1932. Looking at your page 5, would that not put it at the upper end of your range of 6.75? I'll get into my information, but would that not qualify the subject for the upper end of your cap rate range?
Based on market region and area, it was given a 6 cap by the model.
Okay, so just out of trying to understand, where would one get a 6.75% in the city then, if you were of the appropriate age?
North End, market regions 4 and market regions 7. They get a premium on their capitalization rates. as the property doesn't fall into these market regions, it didn't get a premium applied to it by the law.
So age and area, so condition isn't taken into account then?
Condition is something that we do, well, not for capitalization.
Okay. Moving on quickly here, looking at rental comps, 40 Young Street, this is on your page 4. That's also one of our, is that one of our properties today?
Yeah, it
No,
is.
yes
Yeah.
it is. As we'll see, it's in considerably better condition. Would you agree? Not great. but
I
better.
haven't,
And you
like I
have-
said, I haven't
you haven't
inspected
been-
the property.
It's unfair of me to ask.
I can't
that.
answer
I
that
apologize.
question.
Yeah. 581 Sherbrooke Street, I did review and look at photos. It's managed by Ash Management. It appears to be in better condition than the subject.
I didn't inspect 581 Sherbrooke.
583 Furby is another property managed by the same management company here. Which one are we on? 45. It's all in tougher condition and doesn't necessarily achieve those rents.
Unfortunately, I didn't inspect that one either,
Yeah,
but I've seen
fair
pictures
enough.
that it's, yeah, it has issues as well.
And then 324 Arlington, built in 19, or, yeah, I think that one's actually built in 1970. Renovated, it's a newer, nicer property located much further west in the west end and by
Yeah, the
just north of
location,
Portage.
the location is not as good.
Okay. You had, those are all of my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Garrity?
The only question I have is you didn't change, because of your calculation, you adjusted the or, you know, in the amount that you did there, but you didn't change your calculations. You
For net
just-
operating income?
You stayed with the.
Yeah, like our net operating income was 119, when I calculated it based on what they actually declared as rental income loss. The net operating income was 133, which is higher,
Right.
but they did state 174, so I don't know which one is correct, so I can't say, well, this is my new value.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sawatsky?
Yes, you talked about, we talked about the cap rate and the question about what area of the city would warrant a 6.75 or whatever that was. You said the north end, but then you talked about region 4 and 7. Can you clarify what region 4 and 7 are?
I don't think I brought that. I usually have a map with me, and I didn't bring it today. I know Region 4
Can you describe them then?
is north of Logan CPR, and north end Point Douglas type area, not like Jefferson type area. That wouldn't be somewhere that would get a premium, but closer to the north side of the Logan CPR tracks. As for Market Region 7, I don't have my map in front of me, but it's inner city type properties. Yeah, I apologize, I usually have this with me. But this property doesn't seem to fall into either one of them as per our model parameters, but I would think that it would be close to being in Market Region 7.
Is there, how does it relate to the west end, for example?
I believe Market Region 7, some of the west end might be in it, but again, I didn't bring my map with me, so I can't say for sure. I'd be guessing, I don't wanna do that.
You'll bring it next time.
Of course.
Vacancy rate,
Yep.
you got 2.8.
Mhm.
seems to be agreement that this is not the best area. Is that a reasonable vacancy rate for this area?
I mean, we get the data from all the income and expense mailers. I believe that this is in Midland. Midland has a 2.8% vacancy as well, just looking ahead at his, Travis Rupi has the chart. It says 2.8 for Midland. So we're using 2.8, so that would be what the market is indicating.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. There are some work permits taken out, and I think the value is about $650,000.
That's the stated value.
That's the stated value?
Yeah, let me check my notes here. If during the inspection they indicated what they actually spent. I know for other ones I do, where it's different and it's higher, but for this one, they just have the stated value at $600,000. That's all the information I have.
You had stated that some of these properties, if they're located in sort of bad areas, they get a bit of a premium.
That is
So
correct.
is this applicable to the subject? It's classified really as the west end. Now, is the west end the same as the north end?
Yep.
It is a tough area. That's no doubt. I know there are a couple cap rates, because you're talking about mainly in the determination of what the cap rate should be, right?
Yeah.
I know I don't want to jump ahead to Trevor's brief, but, yeah, there are social situations in the west and north end that are similar, and they're not ideal.
So, in the questionnaire, it looked like they used a 3% vacancy, and so you're around the same, eh, at 2.8.
Yeah, model is 2.8.
And there was a little discrepancy in regards to the gross, eh?
Well, the gross, what they stated,
Yeah.
remember the net is what the big discrepancy is, because it's 174 or 220 something in terms of their effective gross income, so I don't really know what they're providing.
Okay. I thank you then. Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. So 485 Furby, as already mentioned, and I won't belabor the point, but it is located in the Spence West End area. I'll get you to flip to my page number 13, which has the aerial of the location of the subject. So it's located on Furby between Ellis and Sargent. What I've just provided at the bottom there is a little chart giving you indication of some statistics for the area. You can see that obviously average household income in the area is roughly, well, it's under half of what the city of Winnipeg as a whole is. Change in average household income going up much slower. Average percent of occupied dwellings, 83% versus 35. Unemployment rate of 8.7 instead of 3.6. So this is just to give you an indication of the area. What I was really hoping to include was a stat providing information on employment assistance and other government subsidies that are paid out, and the predominance of people receiving them in that area versus the city as a whole. I think that's a particularly telling stat, but I was unable to find it, unfortunately. Suffice it to say, this particular area is very tough, the Spence West End neighborhood. We'll see that in some of the photos, so let's get going on this particular one. background on the subject property. If you look at the front of my brief, you can see that there's a vacant lot to the north of the subject. That used to be an apartment. It burnt down in the end of 2017 or 16. I've got the information. It was the December 5th, 2017. The neighboring apartment block burnt down, and the crews were there for many, many hours. The thing burnt to a cinder, so they were pouring water on it for many hours. The result of this, both the water at that time as well as the demolition of the property subsequent to that, is that the subject property has sunk on the north side. The water has undercut essentially the foundation somewhat, and you have major structural issues occurring both visually on the exterior of the building as well, obviously, on the interior of the building. There's massive cracks, and you can actually see the sinking on that northern side. I don't have a figure for what the capital cost of repairing something like that would be, but I would suggest to you that it's probably uneconomic to undertake something like that on a building of this vintage in that location with any expectation of getting a financial return on investment. So it's damaged, and it's going to probably remain that way, I would suspect. So that leads to obviously issues with doors and windows and just extensive cracking, and obviously tenants prefer a building that is in better condition than one that is in worse condition. With the subject building itself, if you look at the addenda materials, this particular building had a stabbing of what's quoted as the local KKK boss in 2016. Prior to that, this is the apartment block where Tina Fontaine was last seen. Her family members had suites here, and this is where she was last officially seen, unfortunately. Further to that, if you look at the photos of the building itself, you can obviously see the graffiti on the inside, condition of the common areas. They have had fires in hallways lit, in carpets and in linoleum. Yes, there has been some renovation to units. Are those renovations all pristine? No, they certainly are not. There's been considerable damage to the renovated suites as well. So you can see just some evidence of this in the photos that I provide there. So given the area that it's in, they have significant social issues with drugs, family issues, violence, criminal activity, etc. Page 10 gives you some good indications of the subsidence of the building on the north side there with the cracking. So I won't go through that any further. Property last transacted in 2008, as I state on page number 11 there, $840,000, but arguably it's in worse condition at this point than it would have been upon purchase at that time. Not that we're lower in the value, but that is the background. Moving on to the valuation. As noted by the city, yes, the income expense questionnaire states a gross rent received of $174,586. That's because that is what they actually received. Yes, if you have 100% occupancy, they'd achieve $258,180. they certainly don't have 100% occupancy. The bad debts, as shown there, is a significant factor at this building. And the 3% vacancy, to be honest, does not appear to be reflective of what the actual vacancy for the building was. So they did actually collect the 175,000 roughly in that year. So moving on, page number 15 for valuation. The rental rates shown here are what are quoted for the subject time frame. They don't always necessarily achieve these rental rates, and there are discounts that are applied. I do not have specific information on them, so we've tried to address that in the overall valuation. We've gone with the presented rents. You can see that they range from $635 up to $734. At the very high end, this somewhat fits in line with the market rental rates that are presented on my two charts on the next page and a half. And moving on to page number 17, subject property obviously is registered with RTB. The rents that they get, or the rents that they, maximum rents they're able to charge are the maximum rents. They would not achieve higher rents than those, so the city's 270,000 is not appropriate. We, in doing the valuation, have gone with 100% occupancy to give us our gross net or gross rental revenue of $258,180 based on those rental rates. There is no parking or laundry revenue for the subject. Moving on to vacancy. Subject property in Midlands, overall vacancy there is 4%, ranging for 1 and 2 bedrooms, various levels there as shown. Subject property in 2016, we have better information for that as presented in the addenda. They had a vacancy rate of approximately 32-33% as shown with the figures on page 18. It would not have been different in 15. The 3% that is quoted there appears to be in error. I believe certainly on the subject property, given the condition of it, the history of it, etc., the quality, the likelihood of somebody renting here versus elsewhere, that a premium of vacancy is applicable, so we've gone with 5% for this property. Expense allowance. Their expenses reported for 2015 appear to be well under market at $91,000. In 2016, we have much better, more detailed information, and they were at $142,979. Subject property built in 1912. Poor location, obviously significant damage, etc. We've elected to go with $142,979. Would it be appropriate to make a minor, very minor discount to reflect it back 1 year, perhaps? But I don't think it's out of line. So this gives us our NOI of $68,303. Moving on to capitalization rate. Our capitalization rate chart is presented on page 20. Again, these properties would all be considered in better locations and superior to the subject property, obviously much better condition. We do have a property on Furby, 432 Furby Street. That property was fully renovated at the time of purchase, and it was purchased with the intent of conversion to condominiums. I did do the research on that property. They did condominiumize the block, and they've sold a total of 3 units in the intervening period between purchase and today. Out of, I don't know, I think there was there was 12 or more units in the building, so they've sold a total of 3 in that span of time. So that would give you an indication that 6% is probably on the low side for a fully renovated block in that area. So I won't go through the charts in detail here, but I would suggest to you that a significant premium for a building in this location of this condition with the demand in that area and the vacancy issues that it experienced and the social issues, obviously, would have a significant premium. This is not a block you're going to turn around, so we've applied a 7% cap rate on that basis, giving us a market value of $975,000. And again, the addendum materials are there for you to view as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the assessor, of the appellant?
Yeah. These pictures, are they all from one suite, the interiors?
They're not actually, no.
Did you inspect all the suites in the property?
I certainly did not.
How many did you inspect?
I don't recall specifically, but I did ask for a representative sample. I was there on 2 occasions.
Were there any suites that weren't damaged?
Yes, certainly there would be suites that would not be damaged. I think the suite at on page number 7 would be fairly typical.
So unclean but not damaged, typically, outside of the ones that do have issues. Correct?
The building has significant damage, both in common areas and in suites. Is every suite damaged? No, it's not. But this is not a building that you would look at as being recently renovated, I guess, in most circumstances.
Given the place was purchased for $840,000, 2008, and they spent $600,000+ on it in permit, you don't think that 900 something, whatever you're talking, 975 is low?
No, in fact, I don't. And if you apply, again, the reasonable appraiser test, we're looking at a building that has significant structural issues caused very recently that are only getting worse. Structural issues to a building that is perhaps not worth repairing, given what the magnitude of those expenses might be. The social issues, obviously, as stated in here, they have an issue with collecting their actual rents as well. No, I don't feel that we're low. I think the property is deteriorating.
For your expenses, you opted to use the 2016 expense allowance. Does the board consider post-reference information? Like, you went right to that number. The expense ratio that they stated would have been 43%. You went right to 2016. Does the board consider post-reference information?
Well, I think we're all aware of what the board's position has been on that, but again, you need to look at the reasonability of the value that you're creating, and you've in fact done this or referred to this in some of the material where you indicated that in waterfront property the expenses were low because it was only a partial year, so it'd be inappropriate. Well, the same thing holds true here in that the expenses as quoted for 2015 are simply not appropriate for any building. So being looking looking at the property on a normalized basis, obviously expenses would be higher than that figure. And 2016 expenses, as shown in the addenda, are more thorough, more detailed, and give you a better indication of what expenses on the property would be.
For your cap rate of 7%, you listed a number of properties. And they range from 544 to 6.4. You mentioned that Furby, I mean, it's on the same street, it was purchased at 6%. 1910, similar near, fully renovated, would it not be subject to the same social situation issues, tenancies, whatnot, as the subject property?
It's certainly in the same area. The difference with that property is that it was converted to condo, so you don't have tenants in units that are being offered for sale, so you're not incurring any damage in them. They're simply sitting, and people aren't buying them because they don't want to be investing or living in that area. So what that suggests on that one is that 6% is too low. 129 Lenora in the Wolseley area there, 1929, 27 suites, sold in 2016 at a 6.3% cap. Jameson, I mean, these are all good indicators of superior properties and what they were trading for as far as cap rate.
Nearby Toronto transacted at 5.8, correct?
It did. Now, 257 Toronto is located in very close proximity to U of W and was renovated for the purpose of essentially drawing tenants from the U of W, which it subsequently has.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Garrity?
I have a few, and I'm not sure the relevance of them, but on your report, you have a bad debt amount of 33,000, and yet it's not referred to in the assessor's calculations on page 19.
Right. The assessment department didn't include it in their calculations. But if you look at, I guess, what I did in my valuation is I reflected that vacancy rate is actually much higher than 5%, as shown by the following year. But we did reduce that, made it 5% as being kind of reflective of the area. Midland is a very large area, so to say that overall 4% or whatever the figure was there, I think it's actually 3%, pardon me, is not appropriate throughout the whole area. So 5% was reasonable, and the reasonable as far as an overall figure, but for that building, vacancy is much higher, and they're having difficulty collecting too. So we lowered the vacancy rate and included the bad debt as an ongoing issue with the property. We could have eliminated the bad debt and said it's 20% vacancy.
And that's
But I
what I'm
did it
asking
this
about,
way.
is what is the bad debt? Like, it's in your calculations, but not in the assessor's, so what makes that different? Where does it come from? Is it non-paid rent, or?
It is unpaid rent, uncollected rent for occupied suites, and it comes directly from the income expense mailer.
Okay. Thank you. And the years, it shows on your report, Matt, it shows that there was many years of not receiving rental reports or income reports.
Yeah.
And do you know during that time, have the taxes been paid on this property, even though you weren't getting the reports?
I don't have that information.
You don't, okay. Do you have that?
The taxes have been paid.
They have, thank you. One last, and I don't know about this one. Your estimation, the estimated market value, what tax does that result in? The 1993000?
Tax.
What does, how does that calculate to
I don't
the-
have a mill rate chart in front of me,
Okay,
so I wouldn't be able to.
do you know that, Trevor?
I don't offhand, but I've always been told that we're not
We don't.
appealing.
We don't know that,
Taxes, yeah.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sawatsky?
I have no questions, thank you.
Just, there's a discrepancy in regards to units. The city is at 32 and Trevor, you're at 31?
Yes,
Okay.
my indication is that there's 31 occupiable units in that building.
So I'm just did a quick calculation in regards to, you know, how the bad debts come into play. And it's roughly 13%. 13% plus your 5% would give you a vacancy rate of 18%. So is that basically what you're saying?
Yes, essentially, and I approached it in this way. I could have done it where I simply asked for a much higher vacancy rate and just
Yeah,
disregarded the actual.
because I've never really seen
Bad
bad
debt
debts
collection.
really in there.
So, it's, I suppose it's up to the board how you wanna treat that, but, yes, their vacancy rate, while stated at 3%, is not 3%, which is very clear actually when you look at the I&E, when they're collecting 175,000 roughly on a potential total of 258, less the 33,000 in bad debt, you've got a much higher vacancy rate than 3%.
I thank you. Summation, either party?
No summation.
Mr. Smith?
I do not.
Okay, we're just gonna take about a 4-minute break, okay? Not 5, 4. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order, and we're going to go to 480 Yonge Street, so whenever you're ready.
13051231000 for Yonge Street, 2019 assessment, assessed value $1,449,000. Built in 1912, effective year built 1942, 24 suites. 0 outdoor parking spots, location between Sargent and Ellis, mid-block on Yonge. Page 2 is request for income information. We've got their 15, but 3 years prior to that, we do not have an average monthly rent on page 3 of $741. Gives us a gross potential of 213. Model vacancy and a 54.49 expense rate with a 6 cap as per the age in the area. Comes up with an estimated market value of $1,449,000. I previously stated in the last property that Market Region 7 gets a premium for 2019. After conferring outside, it doesn't. Market Region 4 does. In previous years, it may have had a premium, but in 2018, 2019, the models didn't give it a premium. Just making that clear. Okay. Because it does, these properties do fall into Market Region 7. I've got the map in my phone.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. 4, page 4, those are our rental comps. Bracketing the property in terms of average monthly rent, similar in terms of effective year built, and also the area in which these properties are located in / social situation. So for the income and expense mailer, that begins on page 7, and spans to page 11. Page 11 shows that gross potential suite income is $206,000. The city has it $213,000, so we're close in that regard. This property doesn't indicate on page 7 what the net rents are, nor do they indicate any vacancy. Which doesn't seem realistic. Properties obviously do have vacancy, so I wasn't able to really ascertain what the net rents are, but it's high. The potential is highly similar to what our potential is. So I didn't make any change as the rental rate is supported by the columns. The property was purchased for $800,000 in 2012, December of 2012, and it was renovated 2014, 2015, adding suites, giving a total of 24, adding 3 suites, 24 dwelling units. There was also work done on the inside of the kitchens, bathrooms, whatnot, which can be seen on page 15, 16, 17, and 18. Page 19 is just an ad from October 21st, 2014, just showing what they're asking for rents. Utilities are on top of those rents as well. So given that the income and expenses, well, for one, the expenses that are listed at $39,000 are way too low, so we deferred to model, again, because it's inappropriate. And then they didn't report their income on an effective gross income basis. Model was used. That's my best thing.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
Just very quickly, the last page of your brief there, the 2014 Kijiji ad.
Yep.
So that would indicate that their giving bonuses or discounts to their rental rates, correct? Rest of October rent-free, half off rent for November and December, so you're getting a month and a half to move in for a year.
Yeah,
essentially.
there's incentives.
Okay, so that's gonna impact your revenue, correct?
It would, yeah.
I guess all of my other questions are essentially the same regarding the area, and that, you have a couple of comps that are reoccur in a few of these, so, if I very briefly will pass that out as rebuttal. Again, you weren't able to view the subject property yourself, I gather.
Thank you.
No, I didn't,
Okay. So what I'm showing here with the handout on Agnes and Sherbrooke, which I think is in this one, yes. So you can see the new flooring, painting, cabinetry, et cetera in there, and then description of description of the renovations in the Agnes property. Agnes is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's significantly further west. I would consider it to be much different than the Furby home, Sherbrooke type of area. I'd suggest that it would be superior, and the same would hold true with the 581 Sherbrooke property as included there. You can see the renovations, et cetera, on that. Obviously, Sherbrooke is much closer proximity, but that block appears to be in better condition. I won't ask the same questions again.
Can I just address the rebuttal? Well, I got a map here. Agnes, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 streets west of Furby. So I wouldn't say it's a different neighborhood. It's 2 streets west of Maryland, and Furby's 1 street east of Sherbrooke. In terms of the kind of renovations, I mean, we have these pictures from this ad that you provided, and we have pictures in my brief, though they weren't taken very well in terms of shading. Looks like they've had floors refinished, and they've had kitchen cabinets refurbished as well. So I wouldn't say that they're too different in terms of quality. Would you not agree?
No, not specifically. In this one, you're looking at flooring that's been replaced. Yes, there's degrees of renovation, and I'll get into that with the subject, but I would disagree that they're of the same level. Those are all of my questions.
Ms. Curity?
No questions.
Mr. Sawatsky?
I have no questions.
Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So 480 Yonge Street, the very similar area, very same area. Aerial is shown on page number 12, so you can see its location in between Sargent and Ellis. The property itself did undergo some renovation where they added some basement units, and they did do some renovation to the suites itself. You can see my photos starting on page 4, a number of the exterior, which is just reflective of the area. And then we get into the block itself. You can see obviously damage at the entrance, with being broken into numerous times, damage to common areas. Page number 7 gives you the units themselves. You can see the type of countertop that we're looking at here, and the type of stove, type of cabinetry, fridge, etc. These are new. The flooring is that tile, as you can see there. It's certainly a different level than Agnes Street. The flooring was refinished to my knowledge. So that's the block as it stands. Now this block would be superior to 45 Furby as well as 615 Sherbrooke and 583 Furby when we come to them. There's no on-site parking. The same statements hold true as far as the area. We can get into the valuation. So I valued it on the same basis as the city. What's the potential rent? So their potential gross rent comes to $205,656 based on the actual rents charged at the time, which are shown on my page 14, ranging from $625 to $783. And then we have our rental rate chart. Certainly supports that value for the subject. The parking, again, no parking for the subject, and we have projected a laundry income for this one based on $10 a month per suite, giving you $28.80, which we've added to the revenue. Vacancy for the subject property. It is in the Midland area, but again, there is variances in that. We're looking at the West End Spence neighborhood essentially. Midland overall was at 4%, this being the area it is. The subject experienced 5.5% in 2016. Wouldn't be any different, I don't imagine, in 2015, so we've used 5% in our projections. Expense allowance, the income and expense amount from the I&E for 2015 showed $39,933, which is well below what a normal expense amount would be. Indeed, the 2016 appeared to be very low as well at just over 81,000. We have property from 1912. You can see condition of the interior and just the general damage that they received to windows and paint and exterior and fire escapes and interior lighting and fire alarms and you name it, it happens. Would be low. So in order to fairly evaluate the subject, we deferred to the city's operating ratio of 54.59%. This gives us our NOI of $89,961. My same commentary holds true with regard to capitalization rate for the area. 6.5 seems to 6.3, 6.4 seems to be being paid for renovated properties that I would consider in superior location. We've applied 7% to our NOI for the subject, giving us $1,285,000 in value. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Matthew?
Just for vacancy, you said that Midland, I'm just looking at your page 17, Midland is 3% total or 4% total? Because I know there's two different numbers for 1 and 2 bedrooms.
So that's page, what page was it?
17?
So if you look at Midland and you go to, so the total is 3%, 2 bedroom is 4%, 1 bed is 2.8, bachelor is 2.3.
Okay. And then you use the 2016 vacancy.
Yes, they reported nothing for 2015. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that the vacancy would be similar for it in the earlier year, considering there have been no changes.
My questions would be the same for Jeff, so I don't have any more questions.
Thank you. Security?
No questions.
Mr. Sawatsky?
No questions.
All right, let's press on to Sherbrooke. whenever you're ready.
Roll number 13050343500 Sherbrooke. 2019 assessed value, $1,409,000, just north of Sargent, between Maryland and Erie, so we're in the same area. Request for income information, page 2, shows the history. We got 2015. On page 3, it shows our income value summary, 664, 88 on rent. So going through the parameters with the 54-59 expense ratio, 6% cap. Based on area, that's how we get our estimated market value. Page 4 shows our comps in terms of rental amounts, which are right around the subject property. Subject property, the 1910 has an effective date of 1925 on it. So the comps are in the same area. We talked about them before. Again, with this property, page 7 to 10 shows the income and expense mailer. Page 9, when I multiply the monthly amount by 12, I get 193,680, which is highly similar to the city's gross potential rent of 191,485. So it looks like we're similar in that regard, and they didn't indicate vacancy or net rent, so again, for a calculation of effective gross income. So 2.8 that the city has in the model, and Midland, the average is 3, which we brought up last property, so we're similar in that regard, given that what they've indicated. They've indicated a slightly higher potential gross rent. Midland's 3%, we're using 2.8. Our potential gross income is probably pretty good. And effective gross income as well. The expense ratio, 43,000. Again, this place was renovated in 2013. It's created some new suites in the basement and upgrades to the other suites, which can be found in the pictures in the back end of my brief here. Declared construction value was $225,000, and they purchased the property for $1,001,001 in 2012. So with $1,409,000 on this estimate, probably pretty accurate with that. Just looking at a cost and sale price basis. So defer to model because the expenses are too low, and it looks like based on the calculated income and using model and market vacancy in tandem, we're pretty good on effective gross income. So with a 6% cap as per age and area, our value of $1,409,000 was derived. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith? Questions?
No, I have no questions.
Ms. Curdy?
No.
Mr. Sawatsky?
None.
Get a chance to inspect the property at all?
Unfortunately,
No? Okay. Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So 615 Sherbrooke. The property did transact in, sorry,
Well,
finding my
2012.
2012. In my addenda, I've shown a history of the scale property, which is somewhat informative. I think Mr. Merritt might agree. If you look at 2000, it traded at 115,000. 2005, it traded at 1,350,000, and then it bounced back down to 350,000 in 2007. So that is a very unusual circumstance. Perhaps it's reflective of condition of the property in those intervening times, with an extremely optimistic person in 2005, but in any case, you can see that there's some discrepancy with the value of the property over time there. The 615 Sherbrooke, so we're looking at 24 units. Property was built in 1910. There was some renovation done to it. As far as the units go, in that they did bathroom fixtures as well as kitchen fixtures and appliances. So if we look at my page numbers 4 onwards, you have a couple of the exterior of the building. Then we get into the interiors. You can obviously see graffiti and damage in the common areas. Then we get into the units themselves. This is more than one unit. The kitchen is shown at the bottom of page 5. That is what the renovation was. So that's the type of quality of cabinetry, etc. that's in there. The shelf is considered part of the cabinetry. That was in the other units as well. So this is, as I said, more than one unit, so you can see the condition that some of the property ends up in. Is every unit as beaten down? No, not necessarily, but there is certainly a range, and the condition is much inferior to most properties, I would suggest. So page number 8 just gives you an indication, and I didn't show this in many of my briefs, but for most of these buildings today, mail theft and identity theft is extremely common, so you get the mailboxes broken into on a regular basis and replaced and then broken into, and it's a cycle that goes onwards. Moving on to the valuation, we're in the same area, approached it in the same manner. We've used projection of 100% occupancy at their stated rental rates, which they don't always necessarily achieve. This gives us our $193,680 in gross rental revenue. Their actual revenue as achieved in a future year, somewhat indicative, which you feel free to ignore, is considerably lower than that. We have included parking revenue for the subject at $500. They get very little take up on the parking for the property, and there is no laundry revenue for the subject. The vacancy for the subject, not stated for the relevant year following, it was at 19.1% based on the submission. We are not asking for that, but vacancy is obviously considerably high here, so we are at 10% in our analysis. Their stated expenses, as shown at the bottom of page 16, for 2015 were very low at $44,000. We have a building from 1910 with issues in the area and the condition of the building such as it is, that would be extremely low. So we have had to defer to the city's expense parameter of 54.59, giving us an NOI of $79,359. Our commentary regarding capitalization rate does remain the same, and we've used the cap rate of 7%, giving us our final market value estimate of $1,134,000.
Thank you, Mr. Sorry.
Very brief comment. You do get buildings that are renovated, but that does not mean that they necessarily stay in that condition and generate premium rents. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Smith. Questions?
Questions and comments would be the same for cap rate and post-reference information.
Ms. Garrity?
No questions.
Mr. Sawatsky?
No questions.
All right, we'll go on to the last one, which is Furby, which is, we've had one on Furby, so the floor is yours, Matthew.
Okay. Take a quick glance. Five 8330, roll number 1305062, 000, roll year 2019, April 1/16, assessed value of $1,738,000. Actual built in 1911, 1939, 26 feet of parking. Property was renovated. Permits were taken out. It's an occupancy permit. Permit was taken out February on page 11 of 2014. Interior alteration to close in each floor level of 2 existing light wells to create laundry and bike storage areas, creating 5 new dwelling units in the basement. We're to include architectural, structural, mechanical, and electrical alterations. Permit value $670,000, so they added some properties. And then page 12, this shows more detail in regards to what they did. So for this property, similar area, 6 cap, average monthly rent of $757. Calculates to $1,738,000. Page 4 comparables are the same as have been referenced previously. Page 7, they're showing an effective gross income of $103,034, the bottom of the column on the left, and only $31,000 in expenses, which is really low. Potential gross income on page 9 is listed to be $230,700. So huge vacancy. However, when you look at page 10, the occupancy permit was issued mid-2015. So it would seem that they were still working on it for the first half of 2015. So that would take, that would cover why the vacancy is above 50%. Because there's nobody in there for 50% a year. Pictures of the property, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, so you can see that they put in some new electrical in there, some renovations. So it's the same area, again, the same neighborhood influences would be at play as we had previously discussed. So the reported potential gross income is $230,000, the city's is $236,000. So we're highly similar in that regard. Using our expense ratio 54-59 for this property that was renovated in 2015. We just use the model because the declared don't make any sense. Property was purchased in 2008 for $616,000. That's my evidence, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
I have no questions.
Ms. Carity?
No question.
Mr. Sawatsky,
No question.
Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, 583 Furby. The property aerial is shown on page number 11. So we're immediately south of Sargent Avenue here, in the heart of that Spence West End area. This particular property, of the ones that we're dealing with today, and we've had some tough properties, this one stands out in my inspection, and I'm not going to go into too great a detail, but let's say that it felt unsafe being in this particular property. As you can see from the photos as we go through it, on the exterior there's significant graffiti on the exterior of the building, windows damaged, etc., etc. We get into the interior, and you can see there was a fire code infraction pasted to the front door, which is not the fault of the management or residents necessarily. It had to get taken care of. Things get damaged by the residents. If you look at the bottom of page 6, you can see the gang graffiti that is evidenced there. There's much more of this. I just provided that one. This is a very clear gang marking for the area. Unfortunately, you can't see it on the steps there, but there is drug paraphernalia that was in the common areas as I went through, including needles, etc. Page 7 is the basement hallway where there was stolen goods transaction that occurred in front of us while we were there. You can see the fire door at the bottom of page 7, which has a curiously small spherical hole in the center of a spider web, which I think is pretty clear what that probably occurred from. The building gets a lot of gang activity, unfortunately, and the owners and property management deal with it as swiftly as they can, but unfortunately tenants are obviously afraid of this element and don't frequently speak up, so you get a situation where the building has that influence and occupancy and has the problems that are associated with that occurring within the building of a variety of criminal enterprises, we'll call them. We had one individual meet us at the door when we were inspecting a unit with what could be considered a weapon, so that she felt safe opening her door in that manner. So that's the building we're talking about. Of all the ones we're looking at today, this one has the greatest influence from the social issues in the area. So let's move on from that to the valuation itself. To that note, just so you're clear that this isn't just my impression, the addenda materials include reports on a murder at the property as well as a recent stabbing that occurred in the building as well. So that is there for you to view if you wish. Moving on to the valuation of the building. So that's what we're looking at. How do you value such a building? Well, it's projected rents. It's not really achieving those projected rents, but we need to value it. So we're valuing it at 100% occupancy of what they project their rents to be. That's our starting point. The rents somewhat fall in line with the building. Yes, there have, or with the area, there have been renovations to that building. And some of them were done in 2015. So their reported gross rental revenue for 2015 is considerably under their potential. They reported $102,649, potential being $230,700. Not all of that is due to renovation occurring in the building at that time frame. Pardon me. And again, the renovations that occurred are not all in ideal condition. Moving on from the income side of the equation, vacancy for the subject property. Vacancy was reported at 13% in 2015 by ownership. As well as bad debt of roughly $10,500 for that 2015 period. Going forward, vacancy, reading my materials here, vacancy for the property was at 44.5% for 2015, some of that being renovation induced, so the owners reported a vacancy rate of 13% for 2015. Indications are that it's considerably higher in other years. We've utilized 13% in our calculations with the allowance for additional allowance for bad debt reported as well, because this particular building, they do have a significant number of non-payers over time. Expense allowance, subject property had expenses of $102,653 in 2015, incorrectly stated on the form as $31,000. We've gone with the actual expenses of a $102,000, which falls in line with the expense allowance of the city on a percent basis, giving us our NOI of $87,000+. Our commentary regarding the building area conditions, physical conditions, etc., certainly hold true for this building above and beyond some of the other ones that we've dealt with, and we've applied the same capitalization rate of 7% to the subject property. So they're again governed by RTV. Those are the maximum rents that they're able to charge, but they typically have a discount applied. So the projection of $230 never really would occur for the subject. So our final market value comes to $1,251,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Matthew, any questions?
I have no questions, I have an answer.
Ms. Garrity? No questions. Mr. Swansky?
No questions.
Gentlemen, I think that concludes our business this morning, so thank you very much for your presentations.
Thank you for your time.
And results very soon. I thank you.
Great.